He was laughing before the ink was even dry. Ethan leaned back in his chair at the head of the long mahogany table, tapping his pen against the will as if it were a drumbeat of victory. The lawyers around him exchanged polite smiles, pretending not to watch me. "So that's it," he said, voice dripping with triumph. "Mom left it all to me, every last cent, $180 million. He grinned. "You get nothing, Dad." The words landed with surgical precision. The junior attorney stifled a chuckle. Even Benjamin Cole, the senior partner presiding over the reading, pressed his lips together as if hiding a smirk. My son had turned a legal proceeding into a stage play, and I was the unwilling extra. I just sat there, hands folded, watching him celebrate like a man who'd just conquered a kingdom built by someone else. Then Cole turned the final page. His expression changed. The color drained from his face. He adjusted his glasses, lips moving without sound. The laughter in the room faltered, then stopped entirely. Even Ethan's smirk froze halfway, the confidence sliding off him like melted wax. Something on that page had made the air go still. For the first time in years, my son looked afraid. 6 months earlier, I thought silence was my only inheritance. The workshop smelled of cedar and oil, the perfume of simpler lives. The steady hum of the lathe was my orchestra, the rasp of sandpaper, my rhythm. In here, the world made sense. Wood didn't lie. It had grain scars and strength that came from pressure. I wasn't Richard Callahan, the disgraced architect who lost everything 2 decades ago. I was just Rick, a man making something honest with his hands. The radio murmured in the background, half static, half country song. Then it died, abruptly replaced by the shrill buzz of my old flip phone vibrating on the workbench. I wiped my hands on my jeans and checked the caller ID. Ethan Callahan. The name looked foreign. We hadn't spoken in 20 years, not since the divorce. He was 13 when he last called me Dad. After that, it was Rick or nothing. I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" His voice was smooth, confident, coated in the kind of arrogance you can only afford when you've never built anything with your hands. "Mom's gone," he said flatly. "Stroke, last week." The planer still spun on the bench, shrieking like a ghost. I reached over and killed the motor. The sudden silence felt enormous. "I see," I said quietly. "When's the funeral?" "It's over," he replied. "You weren't invited." He didn't pause long enough for grief to breathe. "Her lawyer's office needs you present for the reading of the will. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Cole and Tremaine, Manhattan. Don't be late." "Why?" I asked. "Your mother and I ended everything 20 years ago. There's nothing of hers that belongs to me." He laughed, a short, cruel sound. "Oh, I know. You're not getting a cent. She hated you. But it's a legal formality. You have to be there to hear it. In person. Think of it as a final confirmation that you're irrelevant." There was a rustle of expensive fabric, the faint clink of a watch against a glass. "I'll even spot you bus fare for the trip home," he added. $15. Consider it closure." Then he hung up. I stood there, the phone pressed to my ear long after the line went dead. Outside Texas, sunlight spilled through the workshop window, painting the floorboards gold. Dust floated like slow snow. For years I'd convinced myself that the past was buried, that the ruins of my old life were sealed under concrete and time. But grief doesn't respect boundaries. I turned off the lights and walked into the small house attached to the shop. On the back of my closet, hidden behind flannel shirts and old jeans, hung a garment bag I hadn't touched since the divorce. I unzipped it carefully, the zipper whispering like a confession. Inside was the same charcoal gray suit I wore to court 20 years ago, the day my name was erased from every project I'd ever built. The shoulders were too broad, the cutout dated. I brushed the dust off anyway. If Ethan wanted to witness my humiliation one last time, then fine. I'd give him a front row seat. The next morning, New York swallowed me whole. The taxi from LaGuardia cut through glass canyons and endless noise. Manhattan smelled like ambition and exhaust. When I stepped out in front of Cole and Tremaine, I felt like an artifact someone had misplaced in the modern world. The building towered above the street, all steel and mirrored windows, a monument to money. Inside the lobby was marble and silence. Even the air seemed expensive. I straightened my tie. The receptionist, a young woman with a headset and a flawless smile, looked up briefly, scanned me, from worn shoes to gray suit, and dismissed me with professional precision. "I'm here for the reading of Laura Monroe's will," I said. My voice sounded rough in the polished room. Her smile tightened. "Mr. Cole will see you shortly. Please wait over there." I sat on a leather couch so smooth it felt unfriendly. Across the room, a few junior lawyers whispered, their eyes darting toward me before slipping away. They saw a relic, not a man. Then the elevator chimed. Ethan walked out first. Tailored navy suit, cufflinks, confidence. The kind of man the city builds fast, sharp, and hollow. Behind him trailed two people, a woman in a white designer dress glued to her phone, and a tanned man with a smile too polished to be sincere. Ethan's entourage. He noticed me stopped mid-step and smiled like he'd discovered an old stain. "Well," he said loudly, making sure everyone heard, "you actually showed up." His companion giggled, the sound brittle as glass. The man beside her smirked. Ethan gestured toward me. "This," he said, pausing for effect, "is my father." The word father came out like an insult, an apology to the room for my existence. I met his eyes. Didn't flinch, didn't speak. For the first time, I saw something flicker behind his perfect composure: confusion, maybe even discomfort. My silence unsettled him. He turned away, pretending I wasn't there. "Let's get this over with," he told the receptionist. Moments later, the heavy oak door at the end of the lobby opened and Benjamin Cole appeared. His gray suit was immaculate, his expression unreadable. He looked like a man who'd spent his entire career balancing truth and profit. "Mr. Callahan," he said, addressing me first. "Thank you for coming." Just 6 words, but the order mattered. Ethan stiffened. His jaw twitched. He wasn't used to being second. Cole turned to him next. "Mr. Callahan," he repeated, same name, colder tone. "We'll proceed." We entered the conference room, a cathedral of glass and mahogany. Ethan took the head seat without invitation. I sat near the door, the position of a man who knows he's not expected to stay long. Cole placed a thick binder on the table, opened it slowly, and began to read. "This is the last will and testament of Laura Monroe Callahan," he announced, his voice calm, practiced. "Dated March 3rd of this year." Ethan checked his watch. The woman beside him sighed dramatically. The tan man smiled at his reflection in the table. Cole continued reading the formalities: debts, charitable donations, small personal gifts. Then he reached the part everyone had been waiting for. "To my son, Ethan Callahan." Ethan straightened, chest swelling. "I bequeath all liquid assets, investments, and real property associated with Monroe Developments Incorporated." The woman clapped softly. Ethan grinned. "Finally," he whispered. Cole turned the page. "And to my ex-husband, Richard Callahan." I felt every eye shift toward me. "Well, son, I leave the sum of $15. A beat of silence. Then Ethan burst out laughing. $15, he repeated, choking on the sound. "For the bus ride home." His laughter filled the room. The woman joined in. Even the tan man let out a sharp bark of amusement. I just sat there watching my son convulse with joy over my supposed defeat. Cole didn't laugh. He just turned another page, and that was when everything changed. His pen stilled, his brow furrowed. The air seemed to tighten. He looked up. His voice when he spoke was different, measured, deliberate. "There's an addendum," he said. Ethan's laughter died instantly. What Cole lifted a second envelope sealed with a red wax stamp. "It's a codicil signed and notarized 1 week before your mother's death. It supersedes all prior articles." The woman's phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the table. The tan man leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Ethan blinked, trying to recover his grin. "Probably some charity clause," he said, waving his hand. "Read it, then." Cole broke the seal. The wax cracked like thunder. He began to read. And just like that, I realized the game wasn't over. It had only just begun. The first time I heard my name again, it didn't come from my son or my ex-wife. It came from the lawyer. Benjamin Cole stood at the head of the long table, the red sealed envelope open in his hand, his voice cutting through the thick air like a scalpel. "This," he said, "is the codicil and amendment to the original will of Laura Monroe Callahan." Ethan shifted in his chair, the smug grin from a few moments ago, already cracking at the edges. "Go on," he said, trying to sound amused. Cole adjusted his glasses. "It begins with a statement." He paused, glancing at me. And I quote, "To the man I wronged most, and to the son who never understood what that meant." The room went very still. Cole cleared his throat and continued reading. "This addendum supersedes all prior articles. It is not about assets, but about truth." Ethan's voice broke the silence. "What the hell does that mean?" Cole ignored him. "The truth is the foundation of every structure, even the ones we destroy. This document exists to correct what I built on lies." The words hung in the room like smoke. Ethan laughed nervously, looking around. "So, what she's writing poetry now, let's move to the part about the assets." Cole set the pages down gently. "We will, Mr. Callahan. But I think your mother wanted this read first." The woman beside Ethan looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her phone. The man with the tan stared at the table as if it might offer an escape. Cole continued, his voice steady. "For 2 decades, I let the world believe my ex-husband was a failure, a thief, and a coward. I did it because silence was easier than confession. But I can't leave this world carrying that lie." Ethan's chair creaked. "She was sick," he muttered. "This isn't binding. It's rambling." Cole didn't look up. "Everything I built, Monroe Developments, the fortune, the empire, it exists because he chose to lose everything. Richard took the fall for my mistakes." The sound that came out of Ethan was half laugh, half gasp. "That's ridiculous." I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just listened as 20 years of silence unraveled word by word. Cole closed the folder. "Mr. Callahan, I think you should hear this next part privately." Ethan shot to his feet. "No. If there's something else, it concerns me too." "Read it." Cole hesitated, then sighed. "Very well." He turned the page. "To my son, Ethan. You've inherited the wealth, but not the wisdom. When the day comes, you'll understand why your father stayed quiet. Until then, I leave you one final lesson. The truth waits, even when we don't want it to." Cole stopped reading. The echo of Laura's voice, cold, meticulous, distant even in death, filled the space she once owned. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Cole said softly, "That concludes the codicil." Ethan pushed back from the table, eyes blazing. "This is absurd. You can't just rewrite a will like some bedtime story." "My mother was not. She was of sound mind," Cole interrupted. "The document was notarized and witnessed. Its validity is unquestionable." Ethan pointed at me. "You did this. You manipulated her. You've been waiting for this moment." I shook my head slowly. "I didn't even know she was gone until you called me." Liar, he spat. You came here to steal everything again. Cole raised his hand. Enough. There will be no accusations in this office. The estate will proceed according to the law. Ethan was breathing hard, jaw tight, like a man whose castle had just cracked. He gathered his papers, muttering, I'll contest this. You'll see. Cole remained calm. You're free to try Mr. Callahan, but your mother was meticulous. There's more documents she instructed me to deliver personally. Ethan froze. More Cole nodded. Not for you. For him. He looked at me. I met his eyes, and in them saw something strange, not pity, but respect. My office will be in touch, he said quietly. There are items that belong to you. Ethan turned toward him sharply. Items? What items? Cole didn't answer. Gentlemen, that's all for today. The meeting ended with the shuffle of papers and silence heavy as stone. Ethan stormed out first, his entourage trailing behind like debris after an explosion. I stayed seated until the room was empty. Cole closed the door gently, then walked back toward me. She planned this carefully, he said. The codicil was hand-delivered a week before her stroke. She wanted it read exactly this way. Why, I asked. He studied me for a long moment. Because I think she knew you wouldn't believe her any other way. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small envelope sealed in black wax. This is for you. She told me to give it to you personally, not by courier. I took it. My name was written in her handwriting, neat, deliberate, with that same flourish at the end of the K she used to practice on napkins when we were young. Thank you, I said quietly. Cole nodded. I'll contact you once I've reviewed the supplemental documents. In the meantime, be careful with that. Outside the city roared car horns, sirens, the endless hum of ambition. But in my ears there was only one sound, the faint crackle of the paper between my fingers. I walked until the noise faded behind me, until the skyscrapers thinned into quieter streets. I ended up on a park bench across from the East River. The water moved slow and gray, carrying the reflection of the towers like ghosts. I turned the envelope over once, twice, then finally broke the seal. Inside was a single folded page. Rick, if you're reading this, it means the truth has already begun to find its way back to you. I couldn't say it then. You wouldn't have let me. You would have told me to stop protecting you, to let the world tear us apart. You were always braver than I was. She'd written it by hand, not typed, not dictated. Ink smudges marked the edge where her fingers must have trembled. There is a key, the letter continued. You'll understand when you find it. Benjamin knows where to send you. Don't destroy it. It's not money. It's what's left of our foundation, L. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. The words didn't make sense yet. They carried a weight heavier than the paper itself. A key. A foundation. What was she hiding? I folded the letter and slid it into my jacket pocket. The sun dipped lower over the water. The city lights began to shimmer one by one, like stars trapped in glass. By the time I reached the hotel, exhaustion had replaced confusion. I poured a drink I didn't really want and sat by the window, staring at the skyline. Somewhere in that maze of light and concrete, my ex-wife had left me a secret. The last time I'd seen Laura, she'd been walking out of a courtroom, head high, her lawyer's hand on her shoulder. She didn't look back. I'd told myself it was better that way, to be forgotten quietly, than remembered with resentment. Now she'd forced me to remember her all over again. I reached into my pocket and unfolded the letter once more. You'll understand when you find it, she had written. For the first time in years, I felt something stir that wasn't anger or shame. It was curiosity, maybe even hope. Outside, the city glowed like an unfinished blueprint, lines, lights, endless potential. I raised the glass, studying my reflection in the window. "All right, Laura," I murmured. "Let's see what you built this time." The drink burned going down, but the fire felt good. It was the first warmth I'd allowed myself in 20 years. Somewhere out there, a truth was waiting. And this time, I wasn't going to run from it. The next morning, Benjamin Cole called before the city was awake. His voice was calm, almost apologetic. "Mr. Callahan, I believe you should come by my office. There's something your late wife wanted me to deliver in person." "I thought that was what yesterday was for," I said, staring at the half-finished coffee on my nightstand. "She made sure this part wouldn't be public," he replied. "It's not an asset. It's something else." The line clicked dead before I could ask more. Outside Manhattan was still gray with early light. Steam rose from the manholes. The streets smelled of rain and cab exhaust. I walked to Cole and Tremaine instead of taking a taxi. It felt right to arrive under my own power for once, not as a relic carried by someone else's engine. When I stepped into the building, Cole was already standing in the lobby. No secretary, no waiting. Just him holding a brown envelope about the size of a legal pad. "She was very clear about how this should be handled," he said, handing it to me. "You're to read it alone, but I can give you a hint." "What kind of hint?" He gave a small, sad smile. She said, "Tell him the foundation remembers." The phrase hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't heard those words since the day the company fell apart. Cole's eyes softened. "You'll know where to start?" The envelope sat on the desk of my hotel room for hours before I touched it. The city buzzed outside, but I was stuck in a kind of paralysis fear mixed with curiosity. I'd spent 20 years running from Laura's shadow. Now she was calling me back into it from the grave. Finally, I poured a glass of whiskey, sat by the window, and tore it open. Inside were 2 items, a folded sheet of paper and a photograph. The paper carried her handwriting neat and deliberate. "Rick, if you're reading this, it means you stayed. You could have left again, but you didn't. That tells me you're ready. What I built in steel and glass was nothing compared to what you built in silence. I stole your name once. I want to give it back. But to do that, you have to see where the cracks began. Start with Aurora. Aurora. The name hit like an echo through concrete. Aurora Complex had been our first major project together, a luxury residential development built over an old industrial site in the Lower East Side. It was also the first project to collapse under the weight of scandal. When the permits were revoked, the investors pulled out and everything began to unravel. I hadn't been near that site since the day I left New York. I unfolded the photograph. It was faded, taken from a construction scaffold. Laura stood in a hard hat beside a sign that read, "Aurora Groundbreaking, 2008. Behind her, someone had written in marker, "The foundation always remembers." It wasn't a metaphor anymore. It was an address. By noon, I was standing at the corner of Delancey and Monroe, staring at what used to be the Aurora site. The luxury complex had never been completed. The land was fenced off, half converted into a private parking lot. A few rusted girders still jutted from the ground, relics of ambition gone sour. I climbed through a gap in the chain-link fence. My shoes sank into wet dirt. The air smelled of iron and rain. For a long time I just walked, tracing the ghost of the building we'd planned, remembering where walls should have stood, where light should have fallen through glass. I reached the old foundation slab near the north end. A faded construction marker was still visible, AC08. And then I saw it. A small metal plate, half buried under dust and gravel, bolted to the concrete. I knelt and brushed it clean with my sleeve. Under the grime, the inscription read, "Aurora Core Beam Access Panel." The bolts were rusted, but one was loose. I pried it open with a flat piece of rebar lying nearby. The plate lifted with a creak. Inside, wedged between two rusted metal supports, was a small brass box about the size of a book. I hesitated before pulling it out. The lid bore a single engraving, LMC, Laura Monroe Callahan. I sat there in the dirt, the skyline of New York rising behind me, holding a box that had waited 17 years for my hands. When I opened it, I found a key. Not a modern one. A simple brass key, heavy and cold, with a red ribbon tied to the loop. Under it was a slip of paper folded into quarters. If you found this, you're finally ready. The safe is where it always was behind the monarchs. The monarchs. That could only mean one place, Laura's private study in the penthouse. She'd always been obsessed with monarch butterflies, symbols of transformation, she used to say. She had a massive oil painting of them hanging behind her desk. That was where she'd hidden something. I slipped the key into my pocket. For the first time since she died, I felt something close to purpose. Back at the hotel, I washed the dirt from my hands, but it clung under my nails, a stubborn reminder of where I'd been. On the nightstand, the brass key gleamed under the lamp. I poured another whiskey and stared at it. It was absurd, I told myself. This wasn't a mystery novel. My ex-wife hadn't left buried treasure. She'd left guilt. That was all. But even as I said it, I knew better. The truth she'd carried for 20 years wasn't something she could confess to a priest or a court. She'd hidden it in metal and memory, waiting for me to dig it out. The phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Mr. Callahan, Benjamin Cole here. I just received authorization to release your late wife's personal inventory. There's an item you might find relevant, the penthouse keys. I assume you'll want to inspect the property. He attached the address, Midtown. I typed back a single line, I'll be there tomorrow morning. Then I turned off the phone and leaned back the city lights, reflecting off the glass. In the silence, I thought about Laura, about the woman who used to stand barefoot in our first apartment, drafting designs on napkins, convinced she could outbuild fate itself. Somewhere along the way, ambition became armor. And now, from the grave, she was finally taking it off. Across town, Ethan Callahan poured himself another drink in his mother's penthouse. The room still smelled faintly of her perfume lavender, and something sharp underneath, like ozone before a storm. He was pacing when his phone rang. "What is it?" he snapped. Martin Hale's voice came through calm as ever. "Your father's still in New York." Ethan froze. "What?" He visited Cole this morning. He's been seen near the old Aurora site. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Ethan laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "So that's her plan," he said. "She's still playing games." Martin hesitated. "You might want to let this go. Whatever she left, it won't change the law. The estate is still yours." Ethan swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "It's not about the estate anymore. It's about control. He thinks she left him something. I'll find it first." He ended the call and looked out over the city, the same skyline his father was staring at miles away. Two men, one dead woman's secret between them. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old radiator sounded like a whisper from the past. Around 4 in the morning, I got up, shaved, and put on the same gray suit I'd worn to the will reading. In the mirror, I looked like a man about to attend his own trial. When dawn finally broke over Manhattan, I pocketed the key and stepped into the cold. The taxi driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror as we pulled away. "You going to work, sir?" "Something like that," I said. But this wasn't work. It was excavation. By the time we reached Midtown, the city was awake, alive, loud. The penthouse tower loomed above everything glass, catching the morning sun. As I stepped out, I touched the key in my pocket and felt its weight again, the promise, the accusation, the truth waiting to be unlocked. Somewhere behind those mirrored windows, Laura had left one last foundation for me to uncover. And I intended to find it. The elevator doors slid open with a hiss, and the air inside the penthouse felt like a tomb that hadn't yet decided who it belonged to. Sunlight spilled through glass walls, sharp and cold, cutting across polished floors that reflected everything except warmth. I stepped inside slowly, each footstep echoing through the empty space that used to be Laura's kingdom. The silence was so complete it felt staged, as if the apartment itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do. Nothing had changed. The furniture still screamed minimal wealth, clean lines, white leather art chosen by someone who wanted to be remembered as timeless. But it all looked empty. A museum curated by a ghost. I stopped by the piano in the corner. It was spotless, like it had never been played. On top of it sat a single framed photo, Laura younger, radiant, standing beside Ethan at some gala. My absence in the picture felt intentional. I moved toward the study. That was where she'd spent most of her time during the final years, designing, emailing, erasing. The door creaked open when I pushed it. Her scent lingered there, lavender and ink. The bookshelves were meticulously arranged. Architectural models lined the walls, miniature towers of glass and steel that she'd designed after I left. The same towers that had made her empire untouchable. And then I saw it. The painting. It hung behind her desk, massive, consuming the wall. Monarch butterflies, hundreds of them, wings, mid-flight, painted in wild orange and black. I'd watched her buy it 20 years ago at a gallery in Soho. They migrate thousands of miles, she'd said. Even the weakest ones make it home. Home. I stepped closer. The brushstrokes shimmered faintly under the light, as if the wings were moving. My hand brushed against the edge of the frame, and that was when I felt it. A faint vibration. A hum. Hidden wiring. Laura had built an electronic lock behind the painting. The brass key in my pocket felt suddenly heavier. I took it out, turned it in my fingers, and knelt by the lower right corner of the frame. A tiny keyhole sat embedded in the wall trim, invisible unless you knew where to look. I inserted the key and turned. Click. The painting shifted forward with a mechanical sigh, revealing a small steel door behind it, a wall safe. For a moment, I just stared at it. My pulse was steady, but my breathing wasn't. When I turned the handle, the hinges gave way, with a sound that felt louder than thunder. Inside, stacked neatly, were manila folders, flash drives, and a few personal items, a locket, a gold pen, a sealed envelope marked 4R. I reached for it, but something else caught my eye. A small voice recorder sat beside the folders. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room. "Rick," she began, calm, deliberate, the same tone she used when negotiating contracts. "If you're hearing this, it means you found the safe. And if you found it, it means you didn't run this time." I froze. "I kept the records," her voice continued. "All of them. The contracts, the transfers, the offshore accounts. You were right about Helios. They weren't investors. They were launderers. You saved me from them, but I repaid you with silence. I told myself I was protecting our son, but the truth is I was protecting my empire." The recorder clicked once, paused, then resumed. "I thought I could live with it. I thought I could bury you in lies and keep moving. But every building I raised since then felt crooked. Every wall leaned toward guilt. When the stroke came, I didn't see my life. I saw the foundation cracking." Her breathing grew shallow. "You were the only one who built anything real. You built it out of love, out of pain, out of faith I didn't deserve." The recording stopped. I didn't move. My hands were trembling, but not from shock, from something deeper. Recognition. I picked up the envelope marked for R and broke the seal. Inside were several folded pages, her handwriting rushed and uneven this time. Rick, if I could change it, I would, but there are some debts that don't expire. You gave up your license, your career, your name to save mine. You let me walk free when you should have let me fall. For that, I built an empire that never stood straight. You were the only thing holding it steady. I'm leaving you what's left, not the money, not the company, but the truth. I want you to decide what happens next. In the other folder, you'll find the documents that prove what we did and what you didn't. Give them to Benjamin. Let him show the world who you really were. And Rick, forgive me if you can. L. I set the letter down, closed my eyes, and breathed. The air felt heavier, as though the penthouse itself was acknowledging the confession. After a moment, I opened the other folder. Inside were copies of every transaction from the Helios deal, the one that had destroyed my career. My name was on every page, but now so was hers. She'd kept evidence of everything. There was a USB drive taped to the final page. A note underneath read, "Video recording 2008 Helios meeting." My stomach tightened. I didn't watch it. Not yet. Some truths needed to wait until you could stand under their weight. I gathered the letters and closed the safe. When the painting slid back into place, the room looked unchanged, as if nothing had been disturbed. But everything had. I turned to leave and froze. Ethan was standing in the doorway. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, his eyes bloodshot. So he said, voice low, "That's what you were looking for." I didn't answer. He stepped forward. "I saw you come in. Thought maybe you were stealing something. Guess I was right." "I'm not stealing anything," I said. "Your mother left this for me." He laughed bitterly. "Of course she did. She's still controlling everything, even from the grave." "Ethan, don't," he snapped. "Don't talk like you understand her. You destroyed her life." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not anger, but fear. The same fear I'd once seen in Laura's eyes when she realized she couldn't outrun her own mistakes. "I didn't destroy her," I said quietly. "I saved her." He blinked, thrown off by the calm in my voice. "You're lying," he said finally. "You've always lied." I walked past him, the letters in my hand. Then let the truth prove me wrong. He grabbed my arm. "What did you find?" I met his eyes. Answers. Then I pulled free and left him standing there in his mother's mausoleum of glass. Back on the street, the city looked different, brighter maybe, or maybe I was finally seeing it without the dust of regret. The envelope in my pocket felt heavier than gold. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. Part of me wanted to hand it all to Cole immediately, let him clean the record, expose the truth. Another part wanted to burn it, to let the past stay buried where it had already done enough damage. As I walked, the wind from the East River carried the faint scent of salt and cold metal, the smell of unfinished work. The truth had waited 20 years for me to open that safe. It could wait one more night for me to decide what came next. I didn't sleep that night. The letter sat on the table beside my bed, the ink still trembling in my mind like an echo that refused to fade. The city outside was loud, restless, but inside my hotel room, it was just me, the hum of the radiator, and the sound of 20 years collapsing in silence. Laura's voice from the recorder looped in my head. "You were the only one who built anything real." She'd left me the truth. And with it, a decision I wasn't ready to make. I stared out the window as the dawn began to smear the skyline in dull orange light. My reflection looked like a stranger, older, wiser maybe, but not softer. The kind of man who'd spent 2 decades sanding himself down until only the guilt was smooth. By the time I went downstairs, the city was awake. I walked. Without thinking, my hands deep in my coat pockets, the brass key cold against my fingers. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed air. Something that didn't smell like marble and money. The coffee shop on 32nd Street was still half empty when I walked in. The barista didn't recognize me, but the owner did. He was older now, gray at the temples, but his voice was the same. "Rick Callahan," I stopped mid-step. "You remember me? Hard to forget the guy who used to sit in that corner sketching towers on napkins," he said with a grin. "Haven't seen you in 20 years. I smiled faintly. I ran out of napkins. He poured me a cup of black coffee and nodded toward the empty booth by the window. "On the house. You look like a man who needs something real." The words hit harder than he knew. I sat down, watching the people rush past outside. New York was a city of constant reinvention. It forgave everything except weakness. Maybe that's why Laura thrived here. Maybe that's why I left. Halfway through my coffee, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Benjamin Cole. "We need to talk. Come to the office at noon." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Cole's office was quieter than usual when I arrived. The receptionist gave me a polite nod, but didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She could read the tension in the air. Cole stood by the window, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. There was a folder on his desk, thicker than before. "She left more than just the letter," he said as I entered. "I've been reviewing her private records. You should sit down." I did. He opened the folder and spread several documents across the desk. Bank statements, contracts, invoices stamped with foreign banking seals. She documented everything he said. The Helios transactions, the shell companies, even her private correspondence with their directors. She hid them under your name, but she also left proof she was behind it. "So she finally cleared me," I said. Cole hesitated. "Yes, but that's not all. She also left an amended directive to the estate, one that changes how everything is distributed." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He handed me a sealed envelope. "Read it." Inside was a short statement typed and signed. "To be opened only in the presence of my ex-husband, Richard Callahan, and my son, Ethan Callahan." "She wanted you both here," Cole said. "Together." I leaned back, rubbing my temples. "He won't come. Not after what happened." Cole studied me carefully. "He will. Because right now he's more afraid of what's in that envelope than of you. He wasn't wrong." Ethan showed up 2 hours later. He didn't knock, just pushed through the office door like a storm. His eyes were bloodshot, his tie missing, his composure fractured. "Why the hell am I here?" he demanded. "You said this was about my mother's estate. I've already signed the damn papers." Cole gestured for him to sit. "There's one final clause that wasn't read publicly." Ethan laughed hollow and bitter. "Of course there is. She couldn't die without one more game." I stayed silent. Cole opened the envelope, unfolded the paper, and began to read aloud. "To my husband and my son," it began. "If this message reaches you both, it means you've already heard the truth. I am gone, but I'm not finished. The fortune you built your lives around does not belong to one of you. It belongs to both. But before either of you can claim it, you must decide what to do with it together. If you fight, it dissolves. If you agree, it remains." Cole lowered the page slowly. The room was dead quiet. Ethan stared at him, then at me. "She can't do that." "She already did," Cole replied. "It's legal and binding. The estate's distribution now depends on mutual consent between you and your father." Ethan laughed again, but it cracked halfway through. "That's insane. She's punishing me from the grave." I spoke softly. "She's giving you a chance to do what she never could." He turned toward me sharply. "And what's that?" "Tell the truth," I said. His jaw tightened. "You think you're so noble, don't you, the martyr? The selfless man who sacrificed everything. But I know you. You're just as selfish as she was." Cole stepped in. "Gentlemen, this isn't the place." Ethan slammed his fist on the desk. "She ruined my life, and now you get to play the hero." I looked at him, not the man in the suit, but the boy I once knew. The boy who used to sit at my drafting table and trace skyscrapers with his small, steady hands. "She didn't ruin your life," I said quietly. "She built it on lies. I'm just trying to give you something solid to stand on." He froze, and for a second I saw the truth hit him. Not anger, not even shame, just confusion. Cole folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. "You both have 72 hours to decide how to proceed. If there's no consensus, the estate reverts to the Monroe Foundation for public trust." Ethan turned on his heel and left without another word. The door slammed behind him. Cole exhaled slowly. "He'll come around." I shook my head. "Maybe. But he's not fighting for money anymore. He's fighting for meaning." That night I walked the streets until my legs ached. Every corner of the city felt like a blueprint of my past mistakes and memories, layered like steel beams. I passed the construction site of the new Monroe Tower, one of Laura's last projects. The building was nearly complete now, shining like a blade against the skyline. I stopped and looked up. Somewhere inside that tower were walls designed by her, built by people she'd never met, financed by money that came from my ruin. And yet, it was beautiful. For the first time, I didn't feel resentment. I felt gratitude. Because beauty, like truth, doesn't ask for permission. It just exists. I pulled the brass key from my pocket and turned it over in my hand. It caught the city's light glowing faintly. The foundation always remembers. Maybe she was right. Maybe what we built even in lies had the potential to stand if someone finally told the truth beneath it. By the time I reached my hotel, exhaustion had settled deep in my bones. I sat by the window again, staring at the skyline, the same city that had destroyed me, the same one that might finally set me free. Ethan would come around. Or he wouldn't. Either way, the decision was no longer about inheritance. It was about redemption. The kind that isn't granted by lawyers or money. The kind you have to build yourself one honest beam at a time. I turned off the light and let the city's reflection fade into darkness. Tomorrow I would start rebuilding not the company, not the fortune, but the truth. And for the first time in 20 years, I believed the ground beneath me could finally hold. The city was still half asleep when I stepped out of the hotel, but my mind hadn't rested in days. The November wind cut through my coat as I walked down Madison Avenue, the kind of sharp cold that stripped away pretense. Every streetlight flicker, every sound of a passing cab felt amplified, as if the city itself were holding its breath, waiting for the next move. In my pocket, the brass key pressed against my palm. It was small, ordinary, yet heavier than anything I'd ever held. It wasn't just metal. It was memory and debt. By the time I reached the office of Benjamin Cole, the morning sun had turned the glass towers into walls of gold. Inside, everything smelled faintly of paper and lemon polish, the same sterile calm that lawyers seem to breathe instead of air. Cole looked up from his desk when I entered. "You look like a man who hasn't slept," he said. "I haven't." He nodded almost approvingly. "Then you'll understand why I didn't either." He gestured toward a chair and pushed a folder across the desk. "Laura's documents have been processed. They confirm everything: your innocence, her guilt, the structure of the Helios cover. We'll move to formalize your exoneration." I didn't touch the folder. And then what? Cole leaned back, studying me. Then you decide whether you want the world to know. The words settled between us like dust. You think I should? I asked. I think she wanted you to, he said. But I also think she wanted you to forgive her. Forgiveness isn't my expertise. He smiled faintly. Then maybe it's time to learn. I stood, sliding the folder back toward him. Keep it safe. I have something else to finish first. Where are you going? I glanced toward the window, the city reflected in the glass behind him. To find out what she meant by the foundation. The Aurora site hadn't changed since I'd last been there, but daylight made it uglier. The broken fence clattered in the wind, and the empty concrete slab stretched like a scar. I walked to the spot where I'd found the brass box. The soil was disturbed now, the gravel scattered. Someone else had been there. Ethan. Of course he had. The ground around the access panel was fresh, like someone had tried prying it again, but stopped. I crouched, running my fingers over the marks. The realization hit me like a cold wave. He was still chasing something. Not truth, not closure. Control. I stood staring across the empty lot at the skyline beyond. For years I'd been afraid to face what had been buried here. Now it was the only place that felt honest. My phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. You found the key. Don't lose it. Meet me at the Monarch building tonight. 9 p.m. C. Cole. I closed the message and slipped the phone into my coat. The Monarch building, one of Laura's first major designs after our divorce. Of course. She'd named it after those same butterflies that hung behind her desk. She had left breadcrumbs in her architecture. By the time night fell, the Monarch building was nearly empty. A single security guard sat behind the reception desk, half asleep. He didn't even look up when I walked past. Cole was waiting on the mezzanine, hands clasped behind his back, staring at a large bronze plaque mounted on the wall. It bore an inscription, "For those who build, not just for themselves, but for those who come after." Her words, he said when he saw me reading it. She wrote that dedication herself. I stopped beside him. What is this about? He turned, the faintest smile touching his lips. I think it's time you saw what she left behind. The real legacy, not the money. He led me through a corridor lined with glass offices and blueprints framed like art. At the end was a door marked Foundation Archive. Inside, the room smelled of dust and cardboard. Stacks of old project binders filled the shelves labeled by year. Cole walked to one labeled 2008-2009 Aurora. He pulled it down and opened it on the table. Inside was a set of blueprints I hadn't seen in decades. My own handwriting ran along the margins, annotations, corrections, signatures. Laura kept every original copy, Cole said quietly. Even the ones that proved how she used your name. I traced my initials in the corner of one page. RC 2008. My hand shook slightly. She could have destroyed these, I said. Why didn't she? Cole looked at me, eyes steady. Because even liars crave witnesses. He reached into his coat pocket and placed something on the table, a flash drive. This came from the safe. You didn't play it, did you? I shook my head. He plugged it into the laptop on the desk, and the screen flickered to life. The video was grainy, time-stamped, April 2008. A conference room. Laura sat at the head of the table, her face pale but defiant. Across from her were three men in dark suits, the Helios representatives. They slid a folder across to her. It's simple, one of them said. We move the money through your construction accounts. In return, you get the liquidity you need. Laura hesitated, glancing toward the camera as if she knew it would one day be watched. And my husband, she asked. His name's on the contracts, one of the men said. That's the point. The video ended abruptly. I stared at the frozen image of her face, her expression caught between fear and calculation. Cole closed the laptop. She kept that recording for 20 years. My guess, she always intended for you to see it. I swallowed hard. So what now? Cole's voice softened. Now you decide whether to make it public. I looked back at the plaque on the wall, the one that bore her words. For those who build not just for themselves. She built this for redemption, I said. He nodded. And maybe she built it for you. We stepped out onto the balcony, overlooking the city. The skyline was a jagged crown of light. She also left this, Cole said, handing me a small envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper written in Laura's hand. Rick, the Monarch building is yours now. Do something honest with it. Beneath the note was a deed transfer. She transferred ownership 6 months before her death, Cole said. Completely legal. I let out a low breath. You think this was her apology? Cole shrugged. Maybe it was her way of giving you back the ground you built on. I leaned against the railing, the cold metal biting my hands. If I make all this public, the documents, the video, it destroys her reputation. Everything she built. And if you don't, Cole asked, then it destroys me. He said nothing. The wind rose, carrying the hum of traffic below. Finally, I said, maybe it's time both of us stop hiding. Cole nodded. Whatever you decide, I'll back you. Later, back in my hotel room, I placed the flash drive and the letters side by side on the table. The key rested between them, gleaming faintly in the lamplight. The key had opened her safe, but the truth had opened something deeper. A wound, maybe, but also a door. Outside, the skyline glimmered with Laura's towers, each one standing on foundations she'd built with my name. And for the first time, I didn't feel buried beneath them. I felt part of them. The city no longer looked like a monument to her ambition. It looked like proof that even lies can hold if someone somewhere is willing to rebuild them with honesty. I poured one last drink, raised the glass to the skyline, and whispered, You win, Laura. You got me to stay. Then I switched off the light and sat in the dark, the brass key still warm in my hand, waiting for morning and the decision that would change everything. By the time the morning sun filtered through my curtains, the decision had already made itself. The world deserved to know the truth, not the gossip columns, not the boardrooms, not even the courts, but the truth, as it was, without filters or apologies. And if that truth destroyed the Callahan legacy, then maybe it was never a legacy worth saving. I dressed quietly, buttoning the same charcoal suit I had worn to the will reading. It still smelled faintly of dust and sawdust from my workshop back in Austin. I liked that. It reminded me of who I'd been before ambition and betrayal had turned my life into a cautionary tale. Cole met me outside the courthouse. He looked calm, maybe too calm for what we were about to do. You're sure about this? He asked. I've been sure for 20 years, I said. He nodded and handed me a small flash drive. This is a copy of everything. Once we submit it, there's no going back. I don't plan to. We walked through the revolving doors into the marble lobby. The world inside felt sterile and vast. A shrine to the kind of order that only exists on paper. People in suits moved like clockwork, clutching briefcases, whispering in urgent tones. But all I heard was the echo of my own footsteps. We reached the clerk's office, where a young woman barely out of college looked up from her computer. Can I help you? Cole smiled politely. Yes, we're here to submit an affidavit and supplemental evidence regarding the Helios money laundering investigation case file 084172. The woman blinked, typing quickly. Her eyes widened when she saw the file name. That case was closed 16 years ago. I met her gaze. Then it's time to reopen it. It took less than an hour to file everything: the Helios contracts, the offshore transfers, the video recording, even Laura's confession. Each piece of evidence stacked neatly into the system, like bricks in a wall that could finally hold its own weight. When it was done, Cole turned to me. "You just detonated a bomb that's been ticking for 20 years. "I'm not afraid of the noise," I said. As we stepped back into the cold daylight, reporters were already gathering outside. Somehow the word had spread faster than we'd moved. Microphones flashed, cameras clicked, and the questions came like bullets. "Mr. Callahan, is it true your ex-wife laundered funds through your architecture firm? Are you planning to sue the Callahan estate for damages? Is this revenge?" I didn't answer any of them. I just kept walking, Cole at my side, until the crowd thinned and the noise became a distant hum. We stopped at the corner. "They'll come after you," he said. "Investors, the board probably. Ethan, too. You just dismantled his inheritance in public." "He dismantled it himself," I said. "I just took away the lie that held it together." Cole studied me for a long moment. "You know you could walk away now. Move back to Austin, rebuild your practice under your own name. Nobody would blame you." I looked toward the skyline, the towers of glass that bore Laura's fingerprints. "Maybe I will," I said. "But not until the truth finishes its work." That night my hotel phone rang. I almost didn't answer. Dad Ethan's voice said small and sharp through the receiver. "We need to talk." My throat tightened. "Where are you?" "At Mom's office," he said. "The one in the Monarch building? I'll be there." When I arrived, the floor was dark except for a single desk lamp glowing in the corner. Ethan stood by the window staring out at the city. He looked exhausted, eyes hollow suit wrinkled, the veneer of wealth stripped away. "You did it," he said without turning. "You destroyed her name." "I told the truth," I said. He spun around, eyes blazing. "You think that makes you righteous? She built everything from nothing. She gave this city its skyline. And now because of you, she's going to be remembered as a criminal." "She was a criminal, Ethan," I said quietly. "But she was also brilliant and human. You can't erase one without admitting the other." He stared at me, trembling with anger. "You don't get it. That company, that fortune, it was all I had left of her. You took it from me." I stepped closer. "She took it from you long before she died. She built it on lies. I'm just leveling the ground so you can start again." "Start again," he repeated bitterly. "You think I can start again after this? Every headline tomorrow will have my name. Every investor will run. You've ruined both of us." His words hit like a blow, but I didn't look away. Maybe. But at least now we're standing in the same light. He laughed once, a broken sound. "You're unbelievable." Then he walked to the desk, grabbed a file, and threw it onto the floor. Papers scattered like feathers. "You think this is justice? It's humiliation. You wanted revenge, and now you've got it." "I wanted peace," I said. "But you can't build peace on a lie." He froze at that. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was as wide as the city beyond the glass. Finally, he said, "You really believe she loved you, don't you?" "I know she did," I said, "and she loved you too. She just didn't know how to love without control." He looked away. "Maybe that's genetic." There was a flicker of something in his voice, not anger this time, but fatigue. The fight was draining out of him. I moved toward the door. "You don't have to forgive her, Ethan. But don't spend your life defending her mistakes. Build something of your own. That's the only way any of this means anything." As I reached for the handle, his voice stopped me. "Dad?" I turned. He was holding the brass key. "I found this on your table." I nodded slowly. "It's yours now." He looked down at it, turning it in his hand. What does it open? Whatever you're ready to face, I said. I didn't go back to the hotel. I wandered through the streets until I ended up at the East River. The wind off the water was sharp, carrying the faint smell of rain and rust. Across the river, the skyline shimmered towers of glass, reflecting a world that looked perfect from far away. But I knew better. I'd seen what held them up. My phone buzzed again, another call from the press, no doubt. I turned it off. For the first time in decades, there was nothing left to hide behind. No titles, no company, no false narratives, just the truth, standing raw and unpolished like exposed steel. And in that strange, hollow clarity, I realized something. Laura hadn't left me the company to burden me. She'd left it because she trusted me to dismantle the lies she couldn't. She had built walls to keep herself safe. I was meant to tear them down so something honest could grow in their place. I looked at my reflection in the dark water, older, harder, but still alive. The truth hadn't destroyed me. It had rebuilt me. Behind me, the city hummed with the restless noise of ambition. But for once, I didn't feel small in its shadow. I felt free. Tomorrow, the headlines would explode. Names would burn, reputations would fall. But when the smoke cleared, maybe, just maybe, the Callahan name would mean something real again. I watched the lights ripple across the river and whispered, "Rest now, Laura. I'll finish it." Then I turned and walked toward the dawn, the sound of the city rising behind me, not as a monument to what we'd lost, but as a reminder of what still could be built. By the next afternoon, the city was a storm. News vans lined the front of the courthouse, reporters shouting over each other, microphones flashing like gunfire. My name, her name, and the word laundering were trending together in every headline across the country. Callahan empire exposed, architect, exonerated widow, implicated. The story had broken faster than anyone expected, and the truth, raw, unfiltered, and decades late, was now public property. Cole called me just before noon. "You need to stay inside," he said. "It's chaos out there. Investors are panicking, employees are walking out, and your son, well, he's not taking it well." I stared out the window at the crowds gathering below. "He'll have to take it eventually." "He's holding a press conference tonight," Cole said. "He's calling it the real story of my parents." A tired smile touched my lips. "Then I suppose I'll be watching." The press conference took place in the glass atrium of the Monarch building, the same one Laura had designed. Cameras framed the stage, and the air was thick with anticipation. I watched from home, the television screen painting my room in cold blue light. Ethan walked out to the podium, looking sharper than I'd seen him in weeks. Tailored navy suit, perfect posture, the son of two legacies, standing between a mother's empire and a father's ghost. He waited for the room to quiet before he spoke. "Good evening. I know you've all seen the stories. You've read the articles. You've heard that my mother, the late Laura Callahan, was involved in financial crimes, and that my father, Richard Callahan, was exonerated of those crimes." He paused, his voice steady, controlled. "I'm here to tell you that's not the whole truth." I leaned forward, my chest tightening. He continued, "My father wants you to believe he was the victim of my mother's mistakes. But the reality is, they built that empire together. Every document, every transaction, every deal. It all had both their signatures. Maybe my mother made the first mistake, but my father was no innocent bystander." The room erupted in murmurs. Cameras flashed. My hands clenched on the armrest. Cole's voice echoed in my head from the day before, "They'll come after you." Ethan's voice hardened. My father didn't come forward for the truth. He came forward for revenge. 20 years ago, he lost everything, his license, his reputation, and my mother. Now he wants to destroy what's left of her name. I won't let him. He stepped back from the podium, eyes cold, and left the stage without taking questions. The broadcast cut to the anchor's voice, but I didn't hear it. I turned off the TV and sat in silence. For a moment, I felt something close to pride because despite the anger, despite the lies, my son had inherited his mother's strength. But beneath that pride was something else. Pain. Because he was still fighting ghosts instead of truth. The next morning, my phone didn't stop ringing. Cole. Reporters. Former colleagues. But it was a call from an unknown number that made me answer. "Mr. Callahan," a voice said. "This is Detective Rios, NYPD Financial Crimes Division. I'd like to meet with you, privately." We met at a diner in Brooklyn. It was old quiet and smelled like coffee and rain. Rios was in her 40s, sharp eyes, sharper tone. She slid a manila envelope across the table. "This came in yesterday. Anonymous drop-off. Thought you'd want to see it." Inside were several black and white photos. Ethan. Meeting with two men I didn't recognize, one of them wearing a Helios pin on his lapel. My stomach tightened. When were these taken? 2 weeks ago, she said. Before the will reading, I looked up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," she replied evenly. "Someone's been trying to reopen the same money channels your wife closed before she died. And your son might be standing too close to the same fire that burned both of you." My pulse quickened. "You think he's involved?" "I think he's being used," she said. "Helios has new leadership. They want to re-enter the U.S. market. Your son still controls parts of the Callahan Financial Trust. They see opportunity." I stared at the photos, the way Ethan leaned in toward those men, eager, trusting, naive. Rios stood. "I can't move without proof, but if you care about your son, you'll find out what he's doing before they do." When she left, the coffee had gone cold. That night I drove to the Monarch building again. It was closed to the public, but my keycard still worked. Laura had seen to that before she died. The halls were dark, empty, except for the hum of the security lights. I went straight to her office, the one she'd kept even after the company expanded. The desk was neat, untouched. The safe I'd opened before was still sealed. I wasn't looking for the past this time. I was looking for signs of the present. On the desk sat a sleek silver laptop, Ethan's, I realized. He must have been using her old office to run damage control after the press conference. The screen was still lit, the desktop filled with files labeled Helios 2.0 Expansion Plan, Monroe Holdings Draft. My chest tightened. He wasn't just defending her legacy. He was continuing it. The folder marked Helios 2.0 was password protected, but I didn't need to open it to know what it contained. The same old pattern: false projections, fake shell companies, offshore transfers masked as legitimate contracts. Ethan wasn't laundering money yet, but he was one phone call away from it. I sank into the chair, rubbing my eyes. God. Laura, what have you done to him? Behind me, the office door clicked shut. I turned. Ethan stood in the doorway, face pale but eyes burning. "I knew you couldn't leave this alone." I rose slowly. "You're making the same mistake she did." He laughed bitterly. "The same mistake? You mean survival? You mean ambition? Don't pretend this is about ethics, Dad. You just want to be the one who gets to write the ending." "This isn't ambition, Ethan. It's a noose. The same one that nearly strangled us both." He stepped closer. "You think I care what happens to me? After what you did? After how you humiliated her?" I told the truth. "You ruined her." I met his gaze steady. "No, she ruined herself. I just stopped cleaning up her mess." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was sharp, filled with everything we'd never said. Then he said quietly, "You know, when I was a kid, she used to tell me you were jealous of her, that you couldn't handle her success." "She told me the same thing about you," I said softly. He blinked, thrown off. "I never hated her success, Ethan. I hated what it cost us. I hated watching her lose herself to the very people she thought she could control. And now you're letting them use you too." He shook his head, stepping back. "You don't know anything." "Then show me," I said. "Show me I'm wrong. Walk away from Helios, right now, before it's too late." His jaw clenched, but I saw the hesitation flicker in his eyes. The same hesitation Laura had shown before signing that first contract. He didn't answer. I stepped forward. "You still have a choice." She didn't. Don't let her mistakes become your inheritance. For a moment, the air between us felt like it might break. Then he turned, stormed out, and slammed the door behind him. The sound echoed through the empty building. I sat there for a long time, staring at the glow of his laptop. The skyline outside shimmered in the glass, fractured into 1,000 pieces. I thought of Laura, her brilliance, her pride, her fear. And I thought of Ethan carrying all of it like a curse he couldn't see. The same empire that had destroyed her was now reaching for him. And this time, if I didn't stop it, there would be no one left to save. I shut the laptop, pocketed the brass key, and walked out into the night, the wind cold and clean against my face. The truth had freed me once. Now it had one more person to save, and I wasn't going to fail him again. I drove until the skyline disappeared in the rearview mirror. The city lights faded into a blur of gold and ash behind me as I crossed the bridge into Queens. I didn't have a destination, only a direction. Somewhere away from lawyers and headlines and ghosts that refuse to stay buried. But ghosts have a way of following you when they share your blood. My phone buzzed just after midnight. It was Cole. "You're not going to like this," he said. "I haven't liked much lately," I replied. He sighed. "Helios just wired an initial transfer $5 million to a new shell company under Monroe Holdings. It's registered in Delaware. The signatory is your son." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. They already got to him. "Looks that way," Cole said. "Rios is watching the account, but once the money moves offshore, it's gone. She's asking for your help before she files anything formal." I took a long breath, staring at the dark highway stretching ahead. "Tell her I'm in." Detective Rios met me the next morning in a parking lot under the Williamsburg Bridge. She was leaning against her car, coffee in one hand, a folder in the other. "You don't look like a man who's been sleeping much," she said. "I don't sleep well when my family's name is attached to criminal files," I replied. She handed me the folder. "That's the full Helios 2.0 file. Your son's digital signature, the dummy accounts, everything. If he completes the next transfer, he becomes legally complicit." I flipped through the pages, scanning numbers, company names, and wire codes. It was a mirror image of the original operation, same pattern, different generation. Rios watched me carefully. "You understand what this means?" "I understand he's drowning," I said quietly. "Just like his mother. And if he doesn't stop, then I'll pull him out myself." Rios took a slow sip of coffee. "You know this could get ugly. Those Helios people don't scare easy." "They should," I said. "They already lost once." That night I found Ethan. He was in the penthouse, sitting at the same grand piano Laura used to ignore. Papers covered the floor, contracts, financial drafts, legal letters. He looked up when I entered, eyes hollow. "Came to congratulate me?" he asked bitterly. "Helios thinks I'm the future." "They think you're desperate," I said. He laughed without humor. "Desperate, no, Dad. Strategic. They're offering what Mom had to fight for. Real power, a global expansion deal. I can fix everything she left behind. By selling your soul to the same people who tried to own hers. Don't start. He stood, his voice rising. You don't understand what it's like to live under both of your shadows. The fallen architect and the tainted genius. You think I can rebuild this family's name with nothing but guilt and old letters? I took a step forward. You rebuild it with integrity. He scoffed. Integrity doesn't pay investors. Neither does prison, I said. That stopped him cold. I dropped the folder Rios had given me onto the table. They're watching you, Ethan. Financial Crimes Division. They have everything: your name, your signature, your transfers. One more move and you're done. His jaw clenched. You're bluffing. Read it. He hesitated before opening the folder. His eyes moved fast, scanning the documents. When he finally looked up, the anger had drained from his face. What was left was fear. She was supposed to protect me, he whispered. Helios said this was clean. They said the same thing to your mother, I said softly. And I let her believe them. I won't let you make that mistake. He sank onto the piano bench, his head in his hands. I just wanted to make her proud. She's gone, son, I said. You don't owe her perfection. You owe yourself peace. He looked up, eyes glistening. What do I do? You walk away, I said. Right now. He shook his head. It's not that easy. They've already wired money. They'll come after me. Then we make sure they never get the chance. We spent the next 2 days in silence, working in the penthouse like fugitives building their own defense. Cole joined us late the first night, coordinating with Rios. Every document we found, every login, every encrypted email we copied and archived. By the third day, we had enough to burn Helios down twice over. Ethan watched me as I sealed the last folder. You've done this before, he said quietly. I learned from the best, I said. He managed a small, broken smile. You know they're going to come after us, right? Let them. I looked out over the city. They'll find we're not the same people they used to own. The next morning, Rios called. They know, she said flatly. Someone tipped them off. We have a window, maybe 12 hours before they pull the servers. How long do you need? I asked. 2 hours to trace the money, 1 to secure the warrants. You'll have it, I said. I hung up and turned to Ethan. It's time. We drove together to the Monarch building one last time. The streets outside were eerily empty, the calm before a storm. Inside, the elevator hummed softly as it climbed. When the doors opened, 2 men in dark suits were waiting in the lobby. Helios. Ethan froze. Dad, I see them. The taller one stepped forward. Mr. Callahan, you've been very busy. I kept my voice even. You should have learned by now, architects always build exit plans. He smiled thinly. You won't get far. You've exposed things that can't be undone. Neither can the truth, I said. We moved fast. Ethan slipped behind me as we took the back stairwell, the sound of footsteps echoing behind us. Somewhere below the front doors crashed open Rios and her team. Sirens cut through the air like razors. By the time we reached the garage, Helios was gone. Vanished into the night. Rios met us by the exit. We got enough, she said. Their accounts, their aliases, all of it. You just ended a 20-year operation. Ethan leaned against the wall, breathing hard. So, it's over. For them, she said. Now it's your turn to decide what to do with your second chance. Later, back at the penthouse, I stood by the window while Ethan sat at the piano again. His hands hovered above the keys, unsure of what to play. You think people will ever forgive us? He asked quietly. I shook my head. That's not what we're after. He glanced up. Then what are we after? The truth, I said. That's enough. He pressed a key. A single note hung in the air, soft, uncertain, but real. We sat there for a long time, listening to the sound fade into silence. Somewhere below, the city kept moving, indifferent, unshaken, alive. For the first time, I didn't feel like its victim. I felt like its witness. Because in the ruins of what we'd built, something honest had finally begun. The storm finally broke the next morning. Rain fell hard against the city, washing over glass towers and marble facades as if New York itself needed cleansing. I stood by the window of the penthouse, watching the gray blur outside, listening to the steady rhythm against the glass. It was the kind of rain that erases sound, thought, and time, the perfect cover for starting over. Ethan was asleep on the couch. He hadn't said much since the Helios raid. The exhaustion on his face reminded me of Laura in her final years, brilliant, haunted, and afraid of silence. Only now did I see how much of her weight he'd carried without ever realizing it. The doorbell rang just after 8. I opened it to find Benjamin Cole standing there, soaked, his expression unreadable. He stepped inside, shaking water from his coat. "I assume you've seen the news?" I gestured toward the muted television. A banner ran across the bottom of the screen: Helios executives arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. Cole dropped a folder onto the counter. "That's the official record. Rios and her team filed the warrants at sunrise. It's over." I didn't move. "Over for them," he said. "Not for you, or him." Ethan stirred at the sound of Cole's voice, rubbing his eyes. "What happens now?" Cole looked between us. "Now comes the fallout. The press will demand statements. Investors will ask who inherits what. And you," he turned to me, "will have to decide what to do with a company that technically belongs to you." I stared at the rain. "I never wanted it." "Maybe not," he said, "but it's yours now. And the world's watching what kind of man you'll be with it." By midday, the calls started coming: journalists, lawyers, old colleagues. Some offered congratulations, others apologies. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I sat at Laura's old desk, the brass key lying beside my hand. I turned it slowly, the metal cool against my skin. It had opened so many things already: a safe, a secret, a truth. But it had also unlocked something else inside me, the part that still believed redemption wasn't a myth. Ethan came in quietly. "Cole says they'll make me testify." "You should," I said. "You were there. You saw what they tried to do." He hesitated. "What if they don't believe me?" "They will, because this time you're telling the truth." He looked down, his voice low. "Do you forgive me for what? For defending her? For blaming you? For everything?" I leaned back, meeting his eyes. "You were defending your mother. I can't fault you for that, but forgiveness, that's not about who deserves it. It's about what sets you free." He nodded slowly, then asked, "Do you forgive her?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I looked at the skyline through the rain-streaked glass. "I think she finally forgave herself. That's enough for me." In the evening, Cole returned with a media liaison, a woman named Rachel, who spoke in calm, deliberate tones. She spread her notes across the coffee table. "We'll need an official statement for the press," she said. "The world wants to hear your side." I smiled faintly. "They've had 20 years to hear my side. They just didn't want to listen." "That may be true," she said, "but this time they're ready. You control the narrative now. If you stay silent, others will speak for you." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "What happens if we tell them everything?" Rachel adjusted her glasses. "Then you'll both become the story, the family who lost everything, then exposed the truth. It's powerful, but it's permanent. Once you speak, you can't take it back." I exchanged a look with my son. He gave a small nod. "We tell it," I said. The press conference was held 2 days later in the same room where Laura's will had been read. I couldn't help but notice the symmetry, same marble walls, same polished table, same air of quiet judgment. Only this time, it wasn't about inheritance. It was about closure. The cameras flashed as we walked in. Reporters leaned forward, pens ready, waiting for blood. Cole took his place at the edge of the room, silent but solid. I stood behind the podium and looked at the sea of faces. 20 years ago, I began. I was accused of crimes I didn't commit. I lost my license, my reputation, and my family. The truth was buried under contracts and lies. Today, that truth has been unearthed. I paused, letting the silence hold. My wife, Laura Callahan, was a brilliant woman. She built an empire with her talent and her ambition. But ambition without honesty is a fragile thing. It cracks under its own weight. When that happened, I took the fall to protect her and our son. I don't regret saving them. I only regret the years I spent silent. I glanced at Ethan. He met my eyes and gave the faintest nod. She left me her company, I continued. Not as a prize, but as a burden. A chance to make right what we both did wrong. Starting today, that company will be dissolved and its remaining assets will be transferred to the Aurora Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting ethical design and rebuilding communities destroyed by corruption. The same communities we once helped destroy. The room erupted in questions, but I wasn't finished. This isn't redemption, I said. It's accountability. The truth isn't meant to protect us, it's meant to rebuild us. I stepped back, leaving the microphone behind. The flashbulbs burst like lightning, but I didn't flinch. Ethan stood beside me, his hand steady on the podium. He spoke next, voice calm but resolute. My mother taught me to dream in glass and steel. My father taught me what happens when those walls are built on lies. Today we start building something that can stand without either of them. The applause was hesitant at first, polite, uncertain. But it grew wave by wave until the whole room was on its feet. That night, after the reporters had gone and the lights were dimmed, I walked to the window overlooking the city. The rain had stopped. The streets glistened under the glow of traffic lights, clean and new again. Ethan joined me quietly. Do you think it's enough? I smiled faintly. It's a start. He looked out at the skyline, the one his mother had built. It's strange, he said. I used to look at these buildings and see her. Now I see you. You shouldn't see either of us, I said. You should see yourself. You're the one who gets to build what comes next. He nodded, eyes shining. And what about you? I turned the brass key one last time in my hand, then set it down on the windowsill. Me. I think I've finally locked the past where it belongs. The wind outside was soft, carrying the faint hum of life below. For the first time in decades, I felt something that wasn't regret. It was peace, fragile, quiet, and real. I closed my eyes, letting the city breathe with me, and whispered into the glass. We're free now, Laura. And for once, the silence that followed didn't hurt. It felt like forgiveness. The days that followed felt strangely quiet, as if the city itself was holding its breath after years of noise. The headlines began to fade. The news cycle moved on, hungry for newer scandals, younger faces. The Callahan name slipped from front pages into smaller columns, buried between business briefs and charity announcements. For the first time in 2 decades, silence wasn't a punishment, it was mercy. The Aurora Foundation launched 3 weeks later. Cole handled the legal structure, Ethan took charge of the public relations team, and I quietly retreated into the background, where I'd always been most comfortable. My name was listed on the board of directors, but I never sat at the head of the table. I didn't want to. Ethan was the one who belonged there now. He spoke with a confidence I'd never seen before. Not the brittle arrogance of youth, but a steady, measured strength. When he stood in front of donors, he didn't talk about wealth or prestige. He talked about rebuilding trust. Every structure we build must be honest, he told them. Because if the foundation is corrupt, everything above it will fall. I sat in the back of the hall that night, listening. It was Laura's voice I heard in him, but softened, tempered by humility. Maybe that was the legacy she hadn't known she was leaving behind. After the event, he found me standing near the exit. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I wanted to." He smiled faintly. "She would have liked this." "I think she does," I said quietly. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the guests filter out the room slowly, emptying, until only echoes and half-finished conversations remained. Then Ethan said, "There's something I need to show you." The next morning, we drove out of the city past the towers and noise into the quiet edges of Connecticut. The air was colder, cleaner, the sky still heavy with low clouds. We stopped at a narrow gravel road that wound through a grove of maple trees, their branches bare for winter. At the end of the path stood a small white farmhouse. It was old but solid, the kind of place built by hand, not machine. "She bought it 2 years ago," Ethan said. "Never told anyone. It wasn't in the will. I found the deed in one of her files." We walked inside. Dust covered everything, but the house didn't feel abandoned, just waiting. There were sketches on the kitchen table, blueprints pinned to the walls, half-finished notes in Laura's looping handwriting. "She was designing again," I murmured. Ethan nodded. "A rehabilitation center. For people who lost everything because of corporate corruption, small business owners, architects, investors. She wanted to give them a place to start over." I traced a finger along one of the sketches, a modest structure with open windows, wide hallways, and light in every corner. It wasn't her usual style. It wasn't meant to impress. It was meant to heal. "She never built it," he said. "No," I whispered. "But maybe we can." He looked at me, eyes bright. "You'd help?" I smiled. "Only if you let me design it." For the first time in years, he laughed, a real unguarded sound that filled the empty farmhouse like sunlight. The months passed quietly after that. I returned to my workshop in Austin, the same one where it all began. The sawdust smelled the same, the tools were right where I'd left them. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't hiding from the world anymore. I was part of it again. The project became our shared purpose. Ethan handled the fundraising, and I designed the structure. Simple, sustainable, honest. Every beam, every joint, every window was a deliberate choice, a reflection of what I'd learned, that strength wasn't in appearance, but in integrity. One evening, while reviewing the plans, I noticed something. Ethan had added a small dedication at the entrance. "The Callahan Center for Renewal. In memory of Laura Callahan. In honor of those who built again." I ran my hand over the words, feeling the roughness of the pencil. For the first time, her name didn't feel like a weight. It felt like balance. Construction began in early spring. The ground was still half frozen. But when the first foundation stones were laid, I felt something thaw in me. Ethan visited every weekend, boots covered in mud, sleeves rolled up, clipboard in hand. Sometimes he'd just watch, asking questions about the process, about materials, about why I measured things twice, even when I already knew the answer. "Because mistakes don't announce themselves," I told him once. "You have to look for them before they show." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's not just about buildings, is it?" "No," I said, "it's not." By summer, the walls began to rise. The scent of fresh timber filled the air. Every creak and hammer strike sounded like absolution. The opening ceremony took place exactly a year after the Helios arrests. A small crowd gathered in front of the completed building, donors, former employees, local families. No cameras, no headlines, just people. Ethan gave the opening speech. I stayed near the back again, but he found me in the crowd with his eyes. "This project," he said, "is more than a building. It's proof that even the most broken structures can be rebuilt. My mother once said that architecture is the art of turning emptiness into purpose. My father taught me that truth gives that purpose meaning. This center is built on both. The applause was soft, heartfelt. When the ribbon was cut, Ethan turned to me and said, "She'd be proud of us." I nodded. So am I. As the guests dispersed, I walked through the halls alone, touching the walls, feeling the texture of the wood beneath my palms. There was no marble, no steel, no glass meant to impress. Just warmth. Just space for people to begin again. When I reached the main hall, I saw a small brass plaque mounted near the entrance. It wasn't in the final plans. Ethan must have added it after the inspection. It read, "For Richard Callahan, who proved that truth can still build." My throat tightened. I hadn't cried in years, but that simple line undid me. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, light spilling across the foundation like a benediction. I stepped outside, the air cool and clean, the sound of laughter rising from the courtyard behind me. For the first time since everything began, the lies, the exile, the will. Reading the truth, I felt something that had eluded me for decades. Not victory, not vindication, peace. And when the wind carried the faint scent of sawdust across the field, I smiled, because I knew Laura was somewhere in it, not as a ghost haunting what we'd lost, but as a whisper reminding us of what we'd built. The Callahan Center opened its doors on a Tuesday morning in late September. The air was crisp, and the sunlight poured through the glass in long, clean lines that painted the floor like gold. I stood by the entrance, coffee in hand, watching the first group of visitors step inside. They weren't investors or executives. They were builders, small business owners, and young architects who had lost everything to other people's greed, people who reminded me too much of who I used to be. They paused beneath the archway, where the brass plaque gleamed in the morning light. Some read it aloud. Some just smiled quietly before moving on. None of them knew the full story behind it, and they didn't need to. The building itself carried the truth. Ethan walked up beside me, adjusting his tie. "The board wants to schedule interviews for the first intake of residents next week," he said. Already I smiled. "You work fast." He shrugged. "You taught me to measure twice." I chuckled softly. "You remember that?" He looked at me. "I remember everything." We stood there for a moment in companionable silence, listening to the hum of the new life filling the halls. It wasn't grand, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. That was enough. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked suddenly. "Miss what?" "The skyline, the glass, the competition." I thought for a moment before answering. "No," I said. "I used to think the skyline was where power lived. Now I think it's just where people go to hide their fears." He smiled faintly. "And here I said, is where people start telling the truth again." In the weeks that followed, the foundation flourished quietly. There were no press releases, no glossy magazine spreads. Just people rebuilding homes, careers, reputations, one honest piece at a time. Cole visited occasionally, still wearing his tailored suits, but with a softness in his demeanor I hadn't seen before. "You realize," he said one afternoon, walking through the courtyard, "this place is your second life's masterpiece." I shook my head. "No, it's Ethan's." He smirked. "You always were terrible at taking credit." I smiled. "Credit was what ruined us the first time." He laughed. "Fair enough." As he walked away, I looked up at the main hall, where sunlight filtered through the open roof, scattering patterns across the walls. Every angle, every beam, every joint had meaning. It wasn't about power or perfection. It was about endurance. And maybe that was what this story had always been about. Not revenge, not redemption, but endurance. The kind that bends without breaking. The kind that carries you through 20 years of silence until you finally learn to listen to yourself again. One afternoon, I received a letter from the city council. They wanted to name an annual architectural scholarship after Laura Callahan, a grant for young designers who believed in building with integrity. I read it twice before setting it down. For a long time, I said nothing. When Ethan came in, I handed it to him. They want to use her name. He read the letter, his expression unreadable. Should we let them? Yes, I said. She earned it. The truth doesn't erase what she created. It just explains it. He nodded slowly, a faint smile touching his lips. Then it settled. That night we stood on the terrace, overlooking the fields. The air was cool, the sky streaked with stars. The building behind us glowed softly, warm light, spilling through the windows, steady and alive. Do you ever wonder what she'd say if she could see this? Ethan asked. I thought about it. She'd find something to fix, I said finally. And then she'd cry when no one was looking. Ethan laughed. Yeah, that sounds like her. We stood there in silence, two shadows framed against a building that was never meant to exist, but somehow did proof that even after betrayal, after ruin, there could still be creation. The next morning, I returned to my workshop in Austin. The scent of sawdust and oil greeted me like an old friend. On the workbench sat a stack of unfinished sketches, small homes, simple structures, nothing grand. I picked up a pencil and began to draw. Each line felt lighter than the last. No deadlines, no pressure. Just the joy of creation. I wasn't building for redemption anymore. I was building because I finally could. As I drew, the morning sun crept through the window, landing on the brass key that still sat on the shelf. I reached for it, turning it over in my hand one last time. The metal had dulled, but the weight was still there, familiar grounding. That key had opened the door to my past. But now, it was just a reminder that some doors aren't meant to stay locked forever. I set it down gently beside the plans for the next project, a small cabin, nothing more, and smiled. Later that week, Ethan called. The first group moved in, he said. One of them asked who designed the building. I told her it was a man who builds second chances. I laughed softly. You always were good with words. Learned from Mom, he said. Then, after a pause, and patience from you. That one hit harder than I expected. Keep it running, son, I said quietly. Don't let it turn into another empire. He smiled through the phone. No. This time, it's a refuge. As evening fell, I stepped outside, the air thick with the scent of rain. The sky was painted in gold and gray, the kind of twilight that makes everything look both new and ancient at once. The Callahan story was over, at least the part the world would ever know. But the truth, the real truth, was still alive in the quiet places, in the echo of a hammer strike, in the foundation of a building built to last, in the bond between a father and a son who had finally stopped running. I took one last look at the horizon and whispered to the wind. We did it, Laura. We built something that didn't break. The wind moved through the trees, soft and warm, almost like an answer. If you've stayed with me until now, tell me, what would you have done with the truth, if it had been yours to carry? Would you have buried it to protect the ones you love, or set it free no matter the cost? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe that even the most broken stories can still build something honest, stay with us. There are more truths yet to be told.